Behind every kick of a ball, there has to be a thought. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Athlete Podcast sponsored by Sports for Champions. Today I am joined by Reading and Southampton footballer Chloe Peplow. How are you today, Chloe?
I'm not too bad, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. If we could start, how did you first get involved with football?
So I first got involved with football at my primary school to start with. So it was just my local primary school, and we had an after school club. So I started playing with the boys. I'd have been around 4, I think. I didn't have much in the way of football in terms of from my family. My brother played a little bit, so I've got an older brother, but mainly just started playing at school. And then my school was the route forward to me being professional now. Were
you sort of athletic as a kid?
I was athletic, yeah. I think I like to play and be involved in every sport. I was never a sit-down class type of student, always wanted to be out and about. Whatever sport that was, I'd be involved.
What kind of player were you early on?
Aggressive, I'd say. Yeah, overly aggressive, but I think that probably came from also having an older brother who was a bit older, liked to kick me about, push me about. So, no, aggressive, and I'd say competitive as well, like always wanted to win.
And then do you remember your sort of first foray into playing real games when it sort of moves from in the back of the garden to actually playing for a team?
Yeah, no, definitely. So obviously I had a couple of games previously where I played with the school, again it was with the boys, but then I signed for, or was scouted by Birmingham at quite a young age. So I think I was 6 when I first initially went into Birmingham. Was a little bit too young to play at the time, but I could imagine my first game was when I was between 6 and 7, and started playing for them. Obviously it would then be every Sunday, but I'd also play for a boys team, so I'd tend to do double weekends where I'd play a Saturday for the boys and a Sunday for Birmingham.
Wow. Do you remember how that was? Do you remember sort of your first trial for Birmingham?
Yeah, no, I do. I think nervous probably to start with, but I think the fact that I played alongside the boys as well probably helped me. It makes you grow up quicker, become a lot stronger and stuff. But yeah, no, probably nervous when I was that young, but I think I settled into it quite quickly, and it's always been a really welcoming environment, the academy, so no, I enjoyed it.
What do you think the steepest learning curve was when you had to adjust to sort of playing more professionally?
I think the fact probably that it is more professionally, and recognising from a young age that it was perhaps something that I wanted to do when I grew up. So it was no longer just, I don't know, a kick about in the garden with my brother. You have certain expectations, I guess, and you're competing to play. There's other people that are as talented and even more talented than you, so it's a big step up, and yeah, competitiveness probably. When
you were playing, obviously you were playing with the boys teams alongside sort of your early days in the academy of Birmingham. How was the attitude towards girls at that time?
I'd probably say when I was younger, I think it's starting to change now, but it'd always be like, oh my God, they've got a girl in their team. It was probably unheard of in terms of, there wasn't a lot of girls that played with the boys, but back then, unless you were in an academy, you didn't really have the option of being an all-girls team, which I think's changed now. So I remember when I was younger, I'd always turn up to the boys' games and they'd be like, oh my God, it's a girl. It was quite unheard of. But I do think the attitude in this day and age is starting to change, and there is more opportunities now. But certainly when I was younger and growing up, it was always a bit of shock more than anything else.
So if you're lining up and you're hearing presumably the players on the other team, but maybe even the parents on the other team sort of whispering or saying things like that, how does that make you feel?
I think from a young age, I think it probably made me feel, I don't know, more competitive and more wanting to do well and prove people wrong. And I think they'd have an expectation before, but once you've played and they've realised that perhaps it doesn't make you any different, and just because you're a girl it doesn't mean that you're any worse off when you're playing. I think it was changing the concept and the perspective around it that really started from a young age, I think, for me.
Do you think you really challenged the expectations of all them guys who are saying all those kind of things?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I also think I'm still in contact with a few of the boys and the young boys that I used to play with, and I think it did massively change the expectation of girls playing football. So
what sort of position were you playing back then?
Back then I was a centre mid, more attacking. I think when you're younger you obviously play every position, so I was put everywhere. As you get older you tend to set out in a certain position, but back then I'd actually say I went anywhere on the pitch. I even had a go in goal, so I was happy anywhere I was, really.
And what position have you kind of progressed into being more comfortable in?
Central midfield now.
Yeah.
Bit of both. Sometimes I play the more holding role, sometimes I play a little bit higher up in the 8, a box to box, but anywhere in centre mid really.
What sort of skill set have you got that make you good for that position?
I'd say probably composure. I think I like to be on the ball. I'm happy to get on the ball in any circumstance. Obviously I'm quite tall, quite physically strong, which you have to be when you're playing midfield, but I'd mostly say in terms of like combativeness and also just composure when I am on the ball.
I played a bit of amateur football, and I know that it's one thing to be able to have a good touch and be good at heads and volleys and kick-ups and that kind of thing, but then it's a totally different thing to play 11-a-side football. Is there anything particular I think that you have that gives you that composure? Is there something in your mentality that kind of makes you good at that role?
I'd say I'm quite calm in general in terms of off the pitch. In terms of my attributes off the pitch, I'm quite a calm person, so I think that probably transfers into my on the pitch stuff. And I think it's just probably always been an attribute of mine when I have played, always wanting the ball, so I think you naturally just progress into them being more comfortable when you are on the ball, when you are in those 11v11 situations. Yeah,
makes sense. So you're at Birmingham through your youth, and then I think you moved down south. How did that come about?
Yeah, so I was at Birmingham up until I was the age of 18. Signed professional and played full time with them from I was 16. And then I got a move. So initially it was actually to Brighton that I went from Birmingham. I spent a year there, but then I got a transfer to Tottenham. So I signed for Tottenham and played there for 2 years in the highest league of women's football. So it just literally came about from obviously playing well and doing well at Birmingham, and then obviously getting the move and the transfer originally to go and get some consistent game time at Brighton, and had a good season there, and then went to Spurs.
So you move in from Birmingham, presumably from the family home to Brighton. How was that?
I think hard initially. I'm a proper family girl, so I've never been away from home, but I think at that time I knew that I'd do anything in order for my football career to progress, and I had to relocate at that time, but I think it's helped me get to where I am today, and it also made me grow up quite quickly and fend for myself. And I think it's something, if you're wanting to achieve what you want to achieve in football, it's something that you have to do.
Steepest learning curve moving out?
I'd actually say there was quite a lot, because I was always like well fended for at home. My mum did everything for me, my grandparents did everything for me, so everything from learning, I don't know, to use a washing machine, it sounds stupid, but learning to cook, you obviously don't get taught those sort of things in school, so I obviously quickly learned that I had to fend for myself in that sort of sense, which I never had previously, really.
Of course. And then moving to Spurs, presumably that was, and like you said, being in the top women's league in the world, realistically. How did that feel? Was there a big transition, or was there a big step up in level?
I wouldn't say there was massively a big step up in level. I think in terms of the ambition of the club, with it being Spurs is a massive club. So you naturally have expectation with that. It was quite a new squad, and I think for us it was probably one of my best seasons playing. We had regular games where we were breaking record attendances. So we had 38,000 at the North London Derby when we played Arsenal. We played West Ham on their home turf, and there was again like 32,000 there. So I think the expectation was changing, and there was a lot more eyes on women's football at the time then. And we actually had a really good season and was doing well and progressing well for a new team. So it was a good season.
That attendance of 38,000, there's sort of there's European derbies that don't get that. You are sort of seeing a big sort of tide change in the attendances in particular. It's like a good barometer for it. How do you feel the feelings changing now towards women's football, especially after the Euros in the summer?
I think the attitude and the actual perspective of women's football is completely changing. I think it's took a long time to get to the stage that it's at, but I think there's finally people starting to take more notice and perhaps accept the game for what it is and the differences that it has within the men's game. But I think, like I said, there's more people enjoyably watching it, and I think the levels surrounding the game in all aspects is changing. The tempo of the game's changing, it's becoming harder, it's becoming quicker, and there's so many more professional outfits in the women's game now that you're starting to see similarities of both men's and women's football.
You're saying about the tempo changing, that's really interesting. Is that something you've noticed in your career, like the game's getting quicker?
Yeah, definitely, I think so. I think girls are starting to have more access from a young age to physical coaches and perhaps access to facilities that I never had when I was growing up. So naturally, I think physicality, there will then be differences, even in terms of strength and conditioning starting at a younger age. having access to the gym at younger age and just access to facilities from girls of a younger age will then obviously transpire into the girls when they then get older. And I think that's something perhaps my generation didn't perhaps have access to when we were growing up. It was behind in that sense, but I definitely think now the game's getting quicker, faster, stronger. There's a lot more emphasis on physicality and stuff and actually being full-time professional athletes.
That's really positive. What sort of things are you focusing on in the gym to improve your football? And I reckon people at home might be interested to get some practical tips.
Yeah, there's so, honestly, in terms of gym programs, strength and conditioning, there's so many different aspects that we look at. Obviously, a lot of our stuff is individually based, so we have a lot of fitness testing based upon like what our strengths and weaknesses are. So for me specifically, probably I've always been more of a long distance endurance athlete, being a midfielder, so my gym program's more specifically about like power, explosiveness, so lots of jumps, lots of sort of bodily movements and stuff like that. So I think it's specified specifically to you as an individual.
And then would you say that your style of play has progressed as you've sort of gone through the different ranks at different clubs?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think physically having progressed, I think naturally you then become a better footballer, because if you're a good athlete, I think you can then naturally progress technically, and so I think if you do improve that side physically, it allows you to move the ball quicker, move around the pitch quicker, so I think naturally they become hand in hand.
Of course, yeah. Something we touched on earlier, you've been with England through sort of all the way through to the under-23s. Can you tell us a bit about that experience and maybe sort of your first sort of introduction to the team?
Yeah, of course. So I think I started with England Youth when I'd have been 14, 15, so it's something called ECPs at the time. So they're like localised England youth development camps, so you start off at like a really young age. You then progress into under-16s would be the first competitive environment for England. So you get scouted obviously from your club, so at that time it would have been Birmingham for me, so you have people come and watch the game and stuff. And I started with under-16s, and you have youth development tournaments, so you play like non-competitive fixtures, and then you progress through. So I'd progress through the under-17s, 19s, 20s, where you have European Championships. Obviously you're competing to play in World Cups and stuff, so you then follow the cycle of the men's, where you do play like the Euros, the World Cups and certain qualifications. So for me it came about, I was luckily involved at a young age, and I managed to keep my foot in the door all the way through all the youth systems.
That's brilliant. And then I think you had a good showing at the Under-20 World Cup. Can you tell us a bit about that? Yeah,
no, of course. So we had our Under-20s World Cup in France. It was in 2018. So we'd progressed through the Euros nicely. We had a really, really strong age group with your likes of Lauren Hemp, your Georgia Stanway and Chloe Kelly, who have obviously gone on to win the senior Euros now. So we had a really, really strong competitive age group. Played out in France. Actually, we got to the semi-finals, was performing well. We lost to Japan, but we then played France in the third place playoff and came away with a bronze medal. So I think that was, for me, probably one of the best moments of my career so far. We were away from home for 6-7 weeks, and I had my family out there watching as well. So for me, that was probably one of the best moments of my career so far. That
must have been amazing. And I believe that third place playoff was decided by a shootout.
Yeah, decided by a penalty shootout. So it was 1-1 at full time. So it was a close-knit game. Obviously it was held in France, so France had a home crowd as well. But yeah, no, decided by penalties. We won 5-4 in the end. I think I took the fourth penalty, which was probably one of the most nervous times of my life.
So obviously England and penalties doesn't normally go well. It's been a bit better in recent years. Mm-hmm. We've seen a little bit of an improvement. So when everyone's deciding the penalty sort of order, did the hand go up straight away?
Yeah, my hand did go up straight away, to be fair, with not much thought behind it. We practiced week in, week out for probably 12 months prior to the World Cup in terms of practicing the penalties, in training, after training, just because we knew at some point at a competitive, obviously, competition that it could always fall down to having to take penalties. So yeah, my hand went up straight away with not much thought behind it, and then I think I quickly had the realisation that I was actually taking one. And yeah, the moment was a bit of a blur, to be fair. My mum, my granddad and my nan were all in the stands, and I could actually hear them behind me as well. So Yeah, no, it went in.
You could hear them, actually.
Yeah, you could hear them because it was a really close-knit stadium. There was a lot of fans behind the goal and stuff. So, yeah, I tried to zone out a bit. But I have one spot that I always follow with and always stick with. So I stopped there and it went in. So
did it follow the same sort of technique? Did everything go right?
Yeah, technique. No, it did. Technique and routine. Like I said, I had the same run-up, gone for the same sport and practiced it for weeks or months prior to actually taking it, so I just stuck to that and followed through with it.
There you go. They do always say don't change at the last second. So you're saying that obviously the women's game's now following the sort of fixture, same sort of fixtures as the men's. Does that lead to the same sort of fixture pile-up? Because they play so much football now, it's unbelievable. Is that something you experienced?
I still think the men play a lot more fixtures, obviously, naturally, than the females, in terms of there's a lot more teams like based in the Premier League than there is in the top league of women's football in England. So they naturally have more fixtures as there's more teams. And the scheduling is becoming more hectic for women's football. There is more fixtures and stuff, but I still think that's an area of development in terms of expanding the top leagues in women's football, so you then can you have fixtures every week rather than having gaps in play. There's not as many fixtures as the men, like I said, but the schedule is better than what it's been in previous years.
What do you see as the future for women's football? Where do you think it's heading?
I think it's heading in one direction, in the right direction. I think, like I said, the perspective's changing massively. I think now, finally, for the first time in a long time, girls have role models that they can look up when they're growing up from school. I think girls are now being allowed to play football in PE, and when I was at school it wasn't the case. So I think it's only going one way. I think there's going to be a lot more professional outfits, and I think there will be a lot more girls of a young age actually believing or wanting to be a female professional footballer.
It does seem like we're heading that way. If you could give one piece of advice perhaps to a young girl maybe thinking of starting a career in football, or maybe somebody who just really enjoys it.
Yeah, I'd say stick at it if you enjoy it. I think you're finally at the time now where there is routes now that you can go down where you become a professional footballer. I think you've got many female role models that you can look up to and watch and inspire to be like, and I just think if you enjoy doing it and it's something you want to do, just believe and stick at it. It's not always necessarily going to be easy along the way, but it's possible now for young girls coming through.
I think that's great advice. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
No problem, thank you very much.
More than welcome, and thank you to everyone at home. It's been a fantastic episode of the Athlete Podcast, and we'll see you next time.